On a brutal Chicago night, inside a restaurant, glowing with warmth and wealth, a waitress one paycheck away from disaster made a choice. She saw a small, shivering child and gave away her only coat, a simple act of kindness that was about to get her fired. But she wasn't just being watched by her furious manager. In the darkest corner, hidden in plain sight, sat the city's most reclusive billionaire. He was the secret owner of everything she could see, a man haunted by loss, searching for one single reason to believe in humanity again. He was about to find it, and in doing so, unravel a web of deceit that would change both of their lives forever. The wind that howled down Rush Street on that Monday night in November had teeth. It was a vicious, predatory cold, the kind that finds its way through every layer of clothing, sinking deep into bone and spirit. For Clara Jenkins, the wind was a constant, unwelcome companion. It was the wind she felt on her walk to the bus stop in the pre-dawn darkness, and the same wind that would be waiting to assault her when her shift at the Gilded Spoon finally ended long after midnight. Inside the restaurant, it was a different world. The Gilded Spoon was an island of defiant warmth and luxury, a place where Chicago's elite came to escape the very reality Clara lived in. The air hummed with the low murmur of expensive conversations, the clinking of heavy silverware on porcelain, and the scent of truffle oil and seared scallops. Golden light from ornate chandeliers bathed the room, making the polished mahogany bar and deep velvet booths gleam with an almost insolent opulence. Clara moved through it all with a practiced, weary grace. At 24, her dreams of finishing her nursing degree felt as distant as the summer. They were tucked away, shelved by the crushing weight of her younger sister Sophie's medical bills. Sophie, with her bright mind and brittle lungs, was the sun Clara orbited. Every double shift, every aching foot, every patron's condescending smile, it was all for Sophie. Her uniform, a crisp black apron over a white shirt, was immaculate, a stark contrast to the worn-out sneakers on her feet, and the single threadbare coat hanging on a staff hook in the back. That coat, a faded navy peacoat she'd found at a thrift store 3 years ago, was her only shield against the Chicago winter. Its buttons were loose and its lining was torn, but it was hers. Her section tonight was a nightmare. Table 7 had sent back their steak twice. Table 9 was lingering over empty coffee cups, killing her turnover. And then there was Robert Henderson, the restaurant's manager. Henderson was a man who seemed to have been born with a perpetual sneer. He moved with the oily confidence of a man who enjoyed his small kingdom of power, his eyes constantly scanning for infractions, for a spoon out of place, for a smile not quite wide enough. "Jenkins!" He hissed his voice, a dry rasp as he cornered her near the kitchen doors. "Table 12. Been sitting there for 45 minutes with just a water. I'm not running a public library. Either get them to order or get them out." Clara glanced over at table 12, tucked away in the least desirable corner of the restaurant, near a service entrance that let in a draft every time it opened. A man sat alone, nursing his glass of water. He was unremarkable, dressed in a simple, dark sweater and slacks. He could have been a college professor or a mid-level accountant. He hadn't been demanding or rude. He just seemed to be observing his gaze, calm and unnervingly steady. "Yes, Mr. Henderson. I'll check on him again," Clara said, her voice carefully neutral. As she turned, the main door opened, admitting a brutal gust of wind and a woman and a small child. They hesitated at the hostess stand, looking utterly out of place. The woman whose name Clara would later learn was Isabella, had a thin, worn jacket pulled tight around her. Her face was etched with worry, but her eyes held a fierce, protective fire as she looked down at the little girl beside her. The child Maya couldn't have been more than 6. She was shivering violently, her small body wrapped in a sweater that was woefully inadequate for the weather. Her lips had a bluish tinge, and her big dark eyes were wide with a mixture of cold and awe at the restaurant's splendor. The hostess, a polished young woman named Brittany, looked at them with thinly veiled disdain. "Can I help you?" she asked, her tone suggesting they had wandered in by mistake. "Aye, we had a reservation," Isabella said, her voice trembling slightly, either from the cold or nerves. "Under Rossi, for 2. Brittany's perfectly sculpted eyebrow rose. She tapped at her tablet. "I don't see a Rossi. Are you sure you're at the right place?" "Yes, I'm sure," Isabella insisted, a flush of color rising in her cheeks. My husband made it. It was supposed to be a surprise for Maya's birthday." Her voice cracked on the word husband, and her story seemed to crumble right there in the entryway. Henderson began to stride over his face, a thundercloud. Clara knew his playbook. He would humiliate them and send them back out into the freezing night. Something inside her, a raw, protective instinct she usually reserved for Sophie, flared to life. Before Henderson could reach them, Clara stepped forward. "I'm sorry, there must be a mistake in the system," she said, giving Brittany a look that was part plea, part warning. "Right this way, Mum." She didn't wait for permission. She grabbed 2 menus and led the stunned mother and child away from the door, away from Henderson's approaching wrath. She didn't lead them to a cramped 2-top. She led them to a comfortable 4-person booth that had just been vacated in her section. "Happy birthday," Clara whispered to the little girl whose shivering was now so intense it was audible. Maya tried to smile, but her teeth were chattering too hard. "Jenkins, my office." "Now," Henderson seethed, grabbing her arm as she passed. In his cramped, windowless office, the lecture was swift and merciless. "Are you insane, breaking protocol, giving a prime booth to street drifters? They're not going to spend more than $20. You just cost this restaurant a $100 table turn. This is coming out of your tips, and it's your final written warning." Clara stood still, her jaw tight. The little girl was freezing, Mr. Henderson. "That is not your concern," he snapped. "Your concern is maximizing profit per square foot. Do you understand me?" "Yes, Mr. Henderson," she mumbled, the fight draining out of her. She returned to the floor, her heart heavy. She took Isabella and Maya's order, a bowl of soup for the mother and a small plate of pasta for the birthday girl. Isabella ordered with a pained shame, clearly aware that it was all she could afford. As Clara delivered the food, she watched Maya. The little girl was still shivering, huddling into her mother's side for warmth. The restaurant's ambient heat wasn't enough to fight the deep chill that had settled into her small frame. Clara looked at the child's shaking hands at her pale face, and in that moment, she didn't see a customer. She saw Sophie on one of her bad days, fragile and struggling. She saw a little girl who deserved to feel warm and safe on her birthday. She thought about her long walk to the bus stop in the biting wind. She thought about the single flimsy coat that was her only defense. Then she looked at Maya again. The decision was made in a heartbeat. Without a second thought, she walked to the staff room in the back. Her hands found her navy peacoat. She unhooked it, its familiar weight a fleeting comfort in her hands. She walked back out straight to the booth. Isabella looked up startled as Clara approached. Clara didn't say a word. She knelt down and gently wrapped her own coat around Maya's small, trembling shoulders. The coat was huge on her, swallowing her up in its worn, warm fabric. Maya stopped shivering. She looked down at the coat, then up at Clara, her dark eyes filled with a profound, silent gratitude that struck Clara to her core. I can't let you do that," Isabella stammered, tears welling in her eyes. "You'll be cold." "It's okay," Clara said, her voice thick with emotion. "Everyone deserves to be warm on their birthday." She gave the little girl's shoulder a final gentle squeeze and walked away feeling both lighter and terrifyingly exposed. She was intensely aware of the stares of other patrons. She felt the searing glare of Henderson from across the room. And from his corner table, the quiet man with the glass of water, Arthur Sterling, watched the entire exchange. His face was unreadable, but for the first time that night, a flicker of something other than desolate stillness moved in his eyes. He had come to his restaurant to feel something, anything other than the hollow echo of his own grief. And he just had. He watched the waitress now coatless, and knew her night was about to get much, much worse. And he knew with a certainty that settled deep within him that he was going to do something about it. The warmth from her act of charity lasted only a few moments before the cold reality of her situation crashed down upon Clara. It was a coldness that had nothing to do with the weather. It was the icy dread of impending unemployment. Henderson had been watching her like a hawk since she'd seated Isabella and Maya. The coat incident was not just a violation of his unwritten rules, it was a direct act of defiance. She tried to busy herself, clearing plates from another table, her hands moving with automated efficiency, while her mind raced. How would she pay next month's rent? How would she afford the refill for Sophie's inhaler? Panic, sharp and metallic, rose in her throat. She forced it down, focusing on the simple rhythm of her work stack, lift, carry, repeat. It didn't take long. Henderson cornered her by the POS terminal, his face mottled with rage. He kept his voice low, but it was laced with venom. "Are you an idiot, or do you just enjoy being insubordinate, Jenkins?" "Mr. Henderson, please," Clara started. "The child was—" "I don't want to hear it." He cut her off his finger, jabbing the air perilously close to her face. "You brought your personal charity case into my establishment, gave them a prime table, and now you're giving away your personal effects like you're running the Salvation Army. This is a high-end dining room, not a shelter. Your actions are unprofessional, and they lower the tone of the entire restaurant." "It was just a coat," Clara whispered, her voice barely audible. "It was the final straw," he hissed. "You're a liability. Your shift ends now. Go home." Clara's heart plummeted. "Go home? But my shift doesn't end for another 4 hours. I need the hours, Mr. Henderson." "Should have thought of that before you decided to play Mother Teresa," he sneered. "Clock out, and don't bother coming in tomorrow. I'm taking you off the schedule. Consider whether you even want to work here anymore." He wasn't firing her outright. It was worse. He was starving her out, cutting her hours until she was forced to quit. It was a cowardly, cruel tactic he'd used before on other employees who had displeased him. It saved the restaurant from paying unemployment and broke the employee's spirit completely. Tears pricked at the back of Clara's eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She would not give him the satisfaction. With a quiet, defeated, "Yes, sir," she turned and walked towards the staff room. The walk felt 100 miles long. She could feel the pitying glances of her fellow waiters and the triumphant glare of Henderson. In the back, she gathered her small purse. The hook where her coat had been was starkly empty. The reality hit her with the force of a physical blow. It was 15 degrees Fahrenheit outside. The bus stop was a 10-minute walk. The bus itself, notoriously unreliable at this hour, could be another 20 or 30 minutes away. She had no coat, no gloves, nothing but her thin uniform shirt and apron. As she stepped out of the staff room, she saw Isabella and Maya getting ready to leave. Maya was enveloped in the big navy peacoat, her small face peeking out her cheeks now rosy and warm. Isabella rushed over to Clara, her hands fumbling to remove the coat from her daughter. "Here, please, you must take this back," Isabella said, her voice thick with a mixture of gratitude and guilt. "I heard what your manager said. I am so sorry. I never meant to cause you any trouble." "No," Clara said, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. She gently stopped Isabella. "You keep it, please. She needs it more than I do. Just have a happy birthday." She managed a small smile for Maya, who gave her a shy wave. Isabella's eyes were filled with tears. "How will you get home?" "I'll be fine." Clara lied, a lump forming in her throat. I'll get a ride." It was a blatant lie, and they both knew it. Isabella hesitated, clutching the coat, her face a mask of conflict. But one look at her daughter, warm and safe, for the first time that evening, sealed her decision. "God bless you," she whispered, before hurrying her daughter out the door and into the unforgiving night. Clara watched them go, a profound sense of loneliness washing over her. She had done the right thing, she knew it in her soul, but the right thing felt impossibly, punishingly cold right now. She walked towards the front door, bracing herself for the Arctic blast. As she passed table 12, the quiet man finally looked up and met her gaze. His eyes, she noticed for the first time, were a deep, startling grey, and they held an ancient sadness. "Excuse me," he said, his voice quiet but resonant, cutting through the restaurant's hum. "Miss..." Clara stopped, surprised he was speaking to her. "Yes, sir. I happened to overhear your conversation with your manager," he said, his expression unreadable. "It seems you're in a bit of a predicament." Clara stiffened, embarrassment flooding her. "I'll be all right, sir. Thank you." She started to turn away, not wanting the pity of a customer on top of everything else. "The M3 bus is notoriously late after 9 p.m., he continued as if stating a simple fact. "Sometimes it doesn't show up at all on nights like this. It's a long wait in this wind." She was taken aback. How would this man, who looked like he belonged in a chauffeured town car, know the schedule of the M3 bus? "I'll manage," she said again, more faintly this time. He paused, then made a decision. "I couldn't help but notice what you did for that child. It was a remarkable act of compassion." He reached into his jacket, not for his wallet, but for a simple, sleek car key fob. He placed it on the table. "My driver is waiting outside. His name is Charles. He's in a black sedan right out front. Let him take you home." Clara stared at the key fob as if it were a foreign object. "Oh no, I couldn't, possibly. That's too kind, but it is not a request," he said, his tone gentle but firm, leaving no room for argument. "It's the least I can do. You did something for that little girl's spirit. Let me do something for your well-being. Charles is a professional. You will be perfectly safe." She was exhausted, cold, and emotionally battered. The thought of waiting at the bus stop, shivering uncontrollably, felt like a final, insurmountable trial. This stranger's offer was a lifeline she was too weak to refuse. "Okay," she whispered, her resolve crumbling. "Thank you. Thank you so much." "There is no need for thanks," he said, his gaze distant again. "Just tell Charles to take the scenic route." He offered a small, sad smile. Sometimes it's good to be reminded that there's still light in this city. Clara picked up the key fob, her fingers numb. She mumbled another thank you and hurried out the door before she could change her mind or break down in tears. Outside, the wind was just as brutal as she'd feared, but there, parked directly in front of the restaurant, was a gleaming black Lincoln Continental. A uniformed driver, an older man with a kind face, stepped out as she approached. "Miss Jenkins," he asked. "Yes. How did you know my name?" The driver, Charles, simply smiled. "Mr. Sterling is very observant. Please get in out of the cold." She slid into the back seat, the plush leather enveloping her. The inside of the car was warm and silent, a sanctuary from the world. As Charles pulled away from the curb, Clara looked back at the Gilded Spoon. Through the large window, she could see the man at table 12, Arthur Sterling. He was no longer looking at his water. He was on his phone, his expression now serious, intense, and focused. He was watching her drive away, but his work, she would soon learn, was just beginning. The ride home was surreal. The silence inside the Lincoln was a thick, comforting blanket. Charles, the driver, was the epitome of professionalism, navigating the icy Chicago streets with practiced ease while respecting her privacy. Clara leaned her head against the cool glass of the window, watching the city lights blur past. The warmth of the car slowly seeped into her bones, but it couldn't touch the chill of anxiety in her heart. She had been unofficially fired, had given away her only coat, and had accepted a ride from a complete stranger. It felt like her life was spiraling out of her control. When they arrived at her run-down apartment building in Logan Square, a world away from the Gold Coast opulence of the restaurant, Charles insisted on waiting until she was safely inside. "Mr. Sterling's orders?" he said, with a polite nod. As she fumbled for her keys, she felt a pang of gratitude, so sharp it almost hurt. This stranger, Mr. Sterling, had shown her more consideration in one evening than her boss had in 2 years. Inside her small apartment, the air was cold. She kept the heat low to save money. Sophie was asleep in her room, a book resting on her chest, her breathing soft, and even for now. Clara looked at her sister, the fierce love she felt for her momentarily eclipsing her fear. This was why she fought. This was why she endured. She tucked the blanket more snugly around Sophie's shoulders and went to the kitchen. Under a magnet on the fridge was a stack of bills, each one a ticking time bomb. The dread returned heavier than before. Meanwhile, back at the Gilded Spoon, Arthur Sterling paid his bill a single glass of water with a crisp $100 bill, telling the new waitress to keep the change. He walked out of the restaurant he owned, unrecognized, just another customer fading into the night. But he didn't go home. He got into a different car that had been waiting for him down the block, a discreet but powerful Audi. "Where to, Mr. Sterling?" the driver asked. "Just drive," Arthur commanded, his voice tight, "and get me Evelyn Davies on the line." A moment later, the crisp, efficient voice of his chief of staff filled the car's quiet interior. "Evelyn here. Everything all right, Arthur?" "I need you to do something for me, Evelyn." Discreetly, he began. "There's a waitress at the Chicago Spoon. Her name is Clara Jenkins. I want to know everything about her. Her family, her financial situation, her employment history, why she's working there instead of pursuing a career. Everything. I want a full report on my desk by morning." "Consider it done," Evelyn replied without hesitation. She was used to her boss's eccentric late-night requests. "And one more thing," Arthur added, his voice hardening. "I want a full deep-dive audit of the Gilded Spoon's Chicago branch. I want to see every invoice, every payroll record, every inventory report for the last 2 years. I'm particularly interested in employee turnover rates, termination reasons, and the expense accounts of the general manager, Robert Henderson." "An audit? Is there a problem?" Evelyn asked, a note of concern in her voice. Arthur stared out the window at the frozen city. He thought of the look on Clara Jenkins's face when Henderson had cut her hours. He thought of her quiet dignity as she faced him. And he thought with a familiar, searing pain of another young woman's face. His daughter Lily. She would have been 25 this year. She had had that same fire, that same instinctive compassion. Lily had been a volunteer at a downtown shelter. One night years ago, she had called him ecstatic because she'd convinced a major corporation to donate 1,000 new coats. "It's so simple, Dad," she had said, her voice bubbling with passion. "You just have to see the person, not the problem. You just have to care." 2 days later, she and his wife, Catherine, were gone, their car hit by a drunk driver on a snowy road. The grief had hollowed him out, turning him into a recluse. He had built a global empire of luxury hotels and restaurants monuments to an opulence he no longer enjoyed. He'd lost his faith in everything, in fairness, in joy, in the basic goodness of people. He had come to the restaurant tonight, on a whim, wanting to feel the ghost of a life he once had, a life where he and Catherine would dine and laugh. Instead, he had found something else entirely. He had seen a flicker of his daughter's spirit in a stranger. "I think there's a problem, Evelyn," Arthur said, finally, his voice thick with emotion. "I think there's a rot, and I'm going to find it." He hung up the silence of the car, amplifying the turmoil in his mind. For years, his vast wealth had felt like a burden, a pointless monument to a life that had ended. He had used it to build walls around his heart. Tonight, watching Clara Jenkins give away her only coat, he had felt the first crack in those walls. He wasn't just investigating a manager or helping a waitress. He was testing a hypothesis. He was trying to see if his daughter had been right, if caring was, in fact, that simple and that powerful. The next morning, Clara woke up to the grim task of job hunting. The internet was a demoralizing landscape of minimum wage positions and entry-level jobs that required 3 years of experience. Her nursing school textbooks mocked her from their shelf. Every application form she filled out felt like another step away from that dream. Her phone buzzed with a text from a co-worker, Maria. "Henderson is on a warpath. He told everyone you quit. He's trying to hire a replacement already." "I'm so sorry, Clara." The lie stung, but it didn't surprise her. Henderson was covering his tracks. She thanked Maria and continued her search, her stomach churning with anxiety. Across the city, in a sleek, minimalist office overlooking the Chicago River, Arthur Sterling was reading the file Evelyn Davies had placed on his desk. It was thorough. Subject Clara Jenkins. Age 24. Orphaned at 16, became legal guardian of her younger sister, Sophie Jenkins, now 18. Sister's medical history, cystic fibrosis. Frequent hospitalizations, expensive medications. Academic record, enrolled in the University of Illinois, Chicago nursing program, maintained a 3.8 GPA until she took an indefinite leave of absence 2 years ago due to financial and family hardship. Financials deeply in debt, behind on rent. Bank account balance, 47. 19th. Employment, 2 years at the Gilded Spoon, punctual, reliable, 0 customer complaints. 2 formal warnings on file, both from Robert Henderson for unauthorized compassion, once for giving a homeless man a free coffee on a sub-zero day, and once for allowing an elderly couple to sit for too long without ordering. Arthur put the file down, a cold fury building inside him. Henderson hadn't just been cruel, he had systematically penalized Clara for the very qualities Arthur valued most. He had documented her compassion as a disciplinary issue. The second file was the preliminary audit report. It was even more damning. Evelyn's forensic accountants had already found glaring discrepancies. Inventory reports for high-end liquor and wine didn't match sales records. There were invoices from a food supplier company, Henderson's Gourmet Imports, that didn't seem to exist. Payroll records showed phantom employees who were likely conduits for Henderson to skim money. The rot was deeper and more putrid than Arthur had imagined. He leaned back in his chair. He could fire Henderson with a single phone call. He could wire Clara enough money to solve all her problems. But that would be too simple. That was the billionaire's blunt instrument. It fixed the symptom, not the disease. His daughter wouldn't have just written a check. She would have sought justice. She would have restored dignity. Arthur Sterling picked up his phone. He had a new plan now. It was more complicated, more personal, and infinitely more satisfying. He wasn't just going to be an anonymous observer anymore. It was time for the owner of the Gilded Spoon to pay a visit. The next 2 days were a slow, agonizing crawl for Clara. Each rejection email from a potential job felt like a small, sharp stone being thrown at her. The number in her bank account dwindled as an automatic payment for Sophie's prescription went through. The spectre of eviction loomed a shadowy monster in the corner of her cramped apartment. The lie she had told Isabella Rossi about getting a ride echoed in her mind. She had been rescued once, but she couldn't count on a mysterious stranger to save her again. Her only respite was Sophie. Despite her own health struggles, Sophie was a beacon of defiant optimism. "Something will work out, Clara," she'd say from the couch where she was sketching in her notepad. "You did a good thing. The universe has to balance the books, right?" Clara wanted to believe her, but the universe felt cruelly out of balance. At the Gilded Spoon, Robert Henderson was feeling the pressure, though he didn't yet know why. He had received a terse, unexpected email from the corporate headquarters of Sterling Hospitality Group, informing him of a routine performance audit. Auditors were a manager's worst nightmare. They were cold, emotionless number crunchers who could uncover any and every shortcut or creative accounting trick a manager might use. Henderson had been skimming for years. It started small fudging inventory on a few bottles of top-shelf scotch, but it had grown into a sophisticated system of phantom suppliers and padded invoices. The non-existent Henderson's Gourmet Imports was his masterpiece, a shell company that billed the restaurant thousands of dollars a month for artisanal cheeses and cured meats that were never delivered. The fear of being discovered made him even more volatile. He became a tyrant, snapping at staff for the smallest of infractions. He needed everything to be perfect for the audit. The restaurant had to look like the most profitable, most efficient machine in the entire Sterling portfolio, and he decided he needed a scapegoat, a distraction, in case the auditors started asking uncomfortable questions. His mind immediately went to Clara Jenkins. He had already told the staff she'd quit, but he hadn't processed her termination paperwork yet. An idea, ugly and insidious, began to form in his mind. On Wednesday afternoon, Clara's phone rang. The caller ID was the Gilded Spoon. Her heart leapt, a wild, foolish hope surging through her. "Hello." It was Henderson. His tone was unnervingly pleasant. "Jenkins. Good news. I've reviewed your file, and despite our recent disagreement, you've been a reliable employee. I'm willing to give you another chance. I need you to come in and work the dinner shift tonight. We're unexpectedly busy." Clara was stunned into silence. "Tonight? That's what I said. 5 p.m. sharp. Don't be late." Before she could ask any questions, he hung up. Relief warred with suspicion. Why the sudden change of heart? Henderson was not a man known for second chances. But she was desperate. A single shift's tips could buy them groceries for a week. She couldn't afford to say no. "See," Sophie said, beaming when Clara told her. "The universe." Clara wasn't so sure. A knot of unease tightened in her stomach, but she pushed it down. She put on her uniform, the familiar fabric feeling, both like a reprieve and a surrender. Meanwhile, Arthur Sterling was preparing for his own visit to the restaurant. He wasn't going as the quiet man in the corner. He had scheduled an official visit as the owner, something he hadn't done in years. The regional vice president was flying in to meet him there. The auditors would be finalizing their preliminary report on site. The stage was being set. His assistant, Evelyn Davies, stood before his desk. "The audit confirms it, Arthur. It's extensive. Embezzlement fraud. Henderson has been robbing you blind for at least 3 years. The total is well over $250,000. Arthur's face was grim. The money was nothing to him, but the breach of trust, the corruption festering in his business, was a deep personal offense. "And Clara Jenkins, did Henderson call her?" he asked. Evelyn nodded. "Yes. We monitored the restaurant's outgoing calls. He asked her to come in for the evening shift." "It's a trap," Arthur said, his voice low. "He's going to set her up. He needs someone to blame if the numbers don't add up. A disgruntled employee who quit and then came back for one last shift. She's the perfect target." "What do you want us to do?" Evelyn asked. "We could warn her." Arthur shook his head. "No. Let him play his hand. I don't want to just fire him, Evelyn. I want to expose him. I want every single person on that staff to see him for what he is, and I want them to see her for who she is." He stood up and straightened his tie. "Tell Charles to bring the car around. It's time for the curtain to go up." Clara arrived at the Gilded Spoon at 4:55 p.m. The atmosphere was tense. The staff was on edge, whispering about the owner's impending visit. Henderson greeted her with a smile that didn't reach his cold eyes. "Jenkins, glad you could make it," he said. "You'll be on cash-out duty tonight. Handle all the final bills for the floor, and you'll be responsible for the closing deposit." This was unusual. Cash-out and the deposit were managerial duties, a responsibility Henderson guarded jealously. Handing it to an employee he had just tried to force out was highly suspicious. "Yes, Mr. Henderson." Clara said, her internal alarm bells ringing loudly. The shift was a blur. The restaurant was indeed busy, filled with an anxious energy. Clara worked diligently at the POS station, processing payments, her hands moving quickly, her mind racing. She was meticulous, double-checking every single bill and credit card slip. She knew Henderson was watching her. Around 9 p.m., a palpable shift occurred. A sleek black car pulled up outside, and a man in an impeccably tailored suit stepped out. He was flanked by 2 other people, a man and a woman, both carrying briefcases. It was Arthur Sterling, but this time he was not the anonymous man in the corner. He was power personified. Henderson scurried to the door, his face a mask of obsequious welcome. "Mr. Sterling, what an honor. Welcome to the Gilded Spoon. We are so thrilled to have you." Arthur gave him a cool, dismissive nod. "Henderson, I'm here with Mr. Davies, our regional VP, and my audit team. We'll need your office." Henderson's smile faltered. Of course, anything you need." As Arthur Sterling walked through the dining room, his eyes scanned the room and found Clara at the cash-out station. For a split second, their eyes met. She saw a flicker of recognition, a silent message that she couldn't decipher, but that made her stand up a little straighter. He was the man from the corner, the man who had given her a ride home, and he was the billionaire owner. The floor seemed to tilt beneath her feet. An hour later, as the restaurant was beginning to wind down, Henderson emerged from his office. His face was pale, and he was sweating despite the room's temperature. He walked directly to Clara's station. "All right, Jenkins, time to close out," he said, his voice strained. "Let's count the cash and prepare the deposit bag." Clara followed him to the back office. The auditors were gone, but the air was thick with tension. Together they counted the cash from the registers. The total was $7,840. Clara carefully recounted it twice. Henderson watched her, his eyes darting around nervously. "Good. Now bag it up." He handed her the heavy canvas deposit bag. As Clara turned to put the bundled cash inside Henderson in a swift, practiced move, palmed a thick stack of $100 bills from the pile. It was $2,000. He slipped it deftly into his jacket pocket while her back was momentarily turned. Clara sealed the bag, completely unaware of the theft. She filled out the deposit slip, $7,840. "I'll take that," Henderson said, snatching the bag from her. "You're done for the night. Clock out." Clara, bewildered by the abruptness of it all, did as she was told. Something was terribly wrong. Her heart hammered against her ribs. As she was walking out, Henderson's voice boomed through the restaurant. "Wait just a minute! Stop her!" Two of the junior managers moved to block the door. Henderson strode towards her, holding the deposit bag. His face was a twisted mask of feigned outrage. "I decided to double-check your work, Jenkins," he announced, his voice loud enough for the entire remaining staff and patrons to hear. He unzipped the bag and turned it upside down on a nearby table. Cash spilled out. "Let's just count this one more time, shall we?" He counted the money with a theatrical slowness. He reached the end, then looked up, his eyes wide with mock disbelief. "Well, what do you know? There's only $5,844 here. It seems we're missing exactly $2,000. He looked directly at Clara, a venomous smirk playing on his lips. $2,000. A nice round number. You were the only one to handle the cash. You were on your way out the door. I think you have something that belongs to me, Miss Jenkins." He was framing her. It was his trap, and she had walked right into it. The entire staff was staring their faces, a mixture of shock and suspicion. Clara felt the world shrinking, the air growing thin. She was trapped. I don't understand," Clara stammered, her mind reeling. "I counted it twice. It was all there, I swear." "Oh, I'm sure you do." Henderson sneered, his voice dripping with condescension. He took a step closer to her, invading her personal space. "Did you really think you could get away with it? You come back for one shift after quitting, handle the cash, and suddenly $2,000 vanishes. It's a classic, desperate move." He turned to the assembled staff, playing to his audience. "This is what happens when you bend the rules for people. No good deed goes unpunished. I gave her a second chance, and she repays me by stealing from the company. From all of us." Clara felt her face flush with a mixture of terror and white-hot anger. "I did not steal anything," she insisted, her voice trembling but firm. "You were there. You watched me count it." "Exactly," Henderson said smoothly. "I watched you count it, and then I watched you bag it. You must be quite the magician." He looked at one of the junior managers. "Call the police." Panic seized Clara. The police. An arrest, a criminal record, her nursing career would be over before it even began. Sophie. What would this do to Sophie? Tears of desperation welled in her eyes. "Please, Mr. Henderson, there's been a mistake. Just recount it. Check the cameras." "The camera in the office has been on the fritz for a week." "Such convenient timing," Henderson said with a smug shrug. "As for a recount, it won't change the facts. The money is gone, and you were the last one to touch it." He had planned this perfectly. Every escape route was cut off. She was cornered, humiliated, and about to be destroyed. The staff looked on, some with pity, others with suspicion. They wanted to believe her, but Henderson's narrative was simple and damning. "That won't be necessary." A calm, authoritative voice cut through the tension. All heads turned. Arthur Sterling stepped out from the hallway leading to the back offices, where he had evidently been waiting. He was no longer accompanied by the VP or the auditors. He was alone, and his presence filled the room with an unassailable gravity. Henderson's smug expression instantly evaporated, replaced by a look of pure shock. Mr. Sterling, I was just handling a delicate employee matter. He stammered, his bravado gone. I heard, Arthur said, his grey eyes fixed on Henderson. I heard everything. He walked slowly towards the table, his gaze never leaving the panicked manager. You're right about one thing, Henderson. It is a classic, desperate move. But you've got the wrong perpetrator. Arthur stopped beside Clara, who was staring at him, utterly bewildered. He gave her a subtle, reassuring glance before turning his full attention back to Henderson. You say the camera in your office is broken, Arthur stated, his voice dangerously quiet. Yes, unfortunately, a wiring issue, Henderson said quickly, wiping a bead of sweat from his forehead. That's interesting, Arthur mused, because my tech team did a diagnostic on your entire system an hour ago. The camera in your office works perfectly. In fact, it has a crystal-clear high-definition feed, a feed that we have been monitoring live from my laptop for the last 20 minutes. The colour drained from Henderson's face. He looked like a man who had just seen a ghost. You. What? Let's talk about magicians, shall we? Arthur continued, his voice rising with controlled fury. I saw a pretty impressive trick myself. A sleight of hand, really. When Miss Jenkins turned to seal the deposit bag, a stack of bills disappeared from the table and reappeared in your jacket pocket. A very specific stack, I believe. Arthur nodded towards his head of security, a large, imposing man who had appeared silently at the edge of the room. Tony, would you mind helping Mr. Henderson empty his pockets? Henderson backed away, his eyes wild with panic. This is an outrage. You can't. I won't be harassed. Tony, the security man, was faster. In 2 strides, he was beside Henderson, his hand firmly on the manager's arm. The jacket, sir. Slowly. With trembling hands, Henderson reached into his inner pocket. He pulled out a thick, folded wad of cash, $100 bills. Tony took the stack and placed it on the table next to the rest of the money. Arthur looked at the stunned staff, his voice ringing with authority. Let's count it together, shall we? We have $5,840 on the table. And this stack, he picked it up and quickly fanned through the bills. $2,100 bills, exactly $2,000, bringing our grand total to $7,840, the exact amount on the deposit slip that Miss Jenkins filled out. A collective gasp went through the room. The truth, stark and undeniable, hung in the air. Henderson's treachery was laid bare for all to see. But wait, there's more, Arthur said, a grim satisfaction in his voice. He gestured to Evelyn Davies, who stepped forward holding a tablet. My auditors have been busy, Robert. They've found your ghost company, Henderson's Gourmet Imports. They've found the padded invoices, the skimmed liquor inventory, the phantom employees on payroll. It's not just $2,000 you've stolen. It's closer to $300,000 over the last 3 years. Henderson crumpled all the fight gone out of him. He looked at the faces of the staff who had feared and respected him just minutes before. Now he only saw contempt. You tried to ruin an innocent woman's life to cover your own pathetic crimes, Arthur said, his voice dropping to an icy whisper. You penalized her for compassion. You punished her for kindness. You are the rot I came here to find. He looked at his head of security. Tony, the police, you wanted to call. They're on their way. But they're not for her. They're for him. As Tony escorted the now sobbing, defeated Robert Henderson towards the front door to await the authorities, the restaurant was silent. The staff stared at Clara, their expressions a mixture of apology and awe. Clara stood frozen, trying to process the dizzying turn of events. She had been on the precipice of ruin, and now she was vindicated. She looked at Arthur Sterling, the man who had orchestrated this entire revelation. He wasn't just a billionaire owner. He was her rescuer. He walked over to her, his expression softening. The formidable corporate titan was gone, and in his place was the quiet, sad-eyed man from the corner table. "Miss Jenkins," he said softly, so only she could hear. "I believe we need to have a chat. But not here." He looked around the room. Somewhere a little less dramatic. He had not just given her a ride home. He had given her back her name, her dignity, and her future. And the biggest surprises of the night were still yet to come. Arthur led Clara away from the gawking staff and into the now empty private dining room at the back of the restaurant. The heavy oak door clicked shut, muffling the chaotic energy of the main floor and creating an island of sudden, profound silence. Clara felt as though she had been carried through a whirlwind and deposited in its calm, quiet eye. She stood awkwardly, her hands clasped in front of her, still wearing the black apron of a job she no longer knew if she had. Arthur gestured to one of the plush chairs at the long, polished table. "Please, sit." She did, perching on the edge of the seat. He sat opposite her, not as a boss or a billionaire, but simply as a man. For a long moment he just looked at her, his grey eyes filled with a complex mixture of gratitude and sorrow. "I owe you an apology," he said, finally the word surprising her. "An apology, sir, you saved me," Clara said, her voice barely a whisper. "I put you in an untenable position," he corrected gently. "I knew Henderson was likely to set a trap, and I allowed you to walk into it. It was the only way to expose him so completely, to ensure there was no doubt in anyone's mind about his character, or yours. But it was a risk, and it was at your expense. For that I am sorry." Clara processed this. He hadn't just stumbled upon the scene. He had orchestrated the entire night as a crucible to test and reveal the truth. "Why?" she asked the question, encompassing everything. "Why go to all that trouble for me?" Arthur leaned forward, his hands clasped on the table. The corporate mask was gone completely, leaving behind a man who looked weary and vulnerable. "Because you reminded me of someone," he said, his voice thick with old pain. "My daughter Lily. She passed away several years ago." He took a deep breath, the first time Clara suspected he had spoken of this to a stranger in a very long time. Lily believed that the world could be changed by small, seemingly insignificant acts of compassion. She believed that seeing the person, not the problem, was the most important thing any of us could do. She would have given her coat away without a second thought. He looked directly at Clara, and she saw the profound grief he carried. "When I saw you give your only coat to that little girl, a girl you didn't know for no reason other than that she was cold, and it was her birthday, it was the first time in a very long time I saw my daughter's philosophy in action. It was the first time I felt hope." He continued, "I built this empire, Miss Jenkins. Restaurants, hotels, monuments to luxury. But I lost my way. The business became about numbers, about profit margins and audits. It became cold like Henderson. You reminded me of what it should be about. It should be about people. It should be about creating places of warmth and welcome, not just for those who can afford it, but for everyone." Clara listened, mesmerized. This powerful broken man was baring his soul to her. "I am of course offering you your job back," he said, shifting slightly, "with back pay for the time Henderson took you off the schedule. But I hope you'll consider that the least of what I want to offer you." He slid a folder across the table. It was from his company, Sterling Hospitality Group. "I'm dissolving my company's old charitable trust. It was a sterile corporate entity that just wrote checks. I'm starting something new. It's going to be called the Lily Sterling Foundation. His voice caught on her name. Its mission will not be to just give money. It will be to seek out and support grassroots acts of kindness. It will find the people who are quietly making the world better and give them the resources to amplify their work. It will build shelters fund scholarships and provide emergency aid. Its guiding principle will be compassion in action. He looked at her, his eyes shining with a newfound purpose. A foundation like that doesn't need a CEO with an MBA. It needs a leader with a heart. It needs someone who understands sacrifice, who isn't afraid to give away their only coat. It needs you, Clara. Clara stared at him, her mind unable to grasp the scale of what he was saying. Me, but... I'm a waitress. I haven't even finished nursing school. You can finish nursing school, he said with a smile. The foundation will cover the full cost. In fact, its first scholarship will be yours. But your empathy, your integrity, that's something that can't be taught in any school. I want you to run the foundation as its first executive director. You will have a full staff, a significant budget, and a direct line to me. Your job will be to find the good in the world and nurture it. Tears streamed freely down Clara's face now, but they were not tears of fear or desperation. They were tears of overwhelming, unbelievable release. It was too much to take in. From the brink of eviction to this. And one more thing, Arthur said, a genuine smile finally reaching his eyes. He pushed another small file towards her. Inside was information on Isabella and Maya Rossi. I had my team look into their situation. Isabella's husband left them. She's a trained graphic designer but lost her job a few months ago. She has an interview tomorrow morning in the marketing department of my hotel group. I have a feeling she'll get the job. He paused. And the folder also contains the deed to the coat you gave her daughter. A navy peacoat from Burberry. It's being delivered to her apartment tomorrow, along with a year's worth of prepaid rent. Clara laughed through her tears, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. The universe hadn't just balanced the books, it had rewritten them entirely. She looked at Arthur Sterling, a man who had entered her life as a shadow and had emerged as a source of unimaginable light. He had been looking for a reason to believe in humanity, and in a strange, beautiful way, she had been looking for proof that her own belief wasn't foolish. They had found the answer in each other. Yes, she said, her voice clear and strong, all traces of fear gone. Yes, Mr. Sterling, I accept. He extended his hand across the table. Please, call me Arthur. As they shook hands, it wasn't a deal between a billionaire and a waitress. It was a partnership, a promise that from the cold ashes of grief and hardship, something warm and powerful could be built. One small kind act on a frozen Chicago night had not just saved a job or exposed a criminal. It had sparked a new beginning, ready to send ripples of warmth and compassion far out into a world that desperately needed them. Clara Jenkins's story reminds us that our true wealth isn't measured by what we own, but by what we are willing to give away. Her single act of kindness wasn't just a transaction. It was a testament to the enduring power of human empathy. It reached across the divide of wealth and poverty and touched the heart of a man who had forgotten how to feel. In the end, it wasn't the billionaire who saved the waitress. They saved each other. They proved that even in the coldest of nights, a single spark of warmth can ignite a fire of change that illuminates countless lives. If this story moved you and reaffirmed your faith in the goodness of people, please show your support by hitting that like button. Share this video with someone who might need a reminder that their kindness matters. And for more real-life stories that explore the incredible strength of the human spirit, make sure you subscribe to our channel and ring the notification bell. Thank you for watching.